Eva Husson, the French director of the film Bang Gang, and she's here in LA, and we are talking with her. So, your film is controversial. It's not out yet, and everybody's talking about it because. What do you think? Why?
I guess because people have a certain idea of what sex should be, and when you come with a subjective vision of the subject matter, it always causes people to question the film and the subject matter.
I saw recently another film from a woman director, an Indian woman director.
Yeah.
And they came out just the other, right? Yes, Le Saison de Femme, and Parched, it's called here.
Oh, okay.
And it's not out yet. But I saw the film and I was like, wow, because it's about sex again. In fact, she told me that the title she wanted to put, it was Sex in the Village. And
okay.
and so what's this thing for women directors to talk about sex in their movie is a way to, there is a kind of emancipation in some way through sex for a woman director, or for a woman in general, in fact.
Well, I guess it has to do with representation and a patriarchal way of representing sex that has been obviously the mainstream storytelling in cinema and other media, and I think a lot of women feel that it doesn't represent accurately their own experience of sexuality, and it was certainly the case for me when I started writing some of the scenes in Bang Gang, where I felt that teenage girls can be crude about certain things and can be unromantic as well, and it doesn't invalidate their vision of sexuality and their experience of it. Doesn't make them less of a woman to feel that way and have that experience. Whereas in the male storytelling perspective, you're sort of always confined to the romantic girl who always says no until she says yes, and it's just not what life is like anymore for a young urban woman. And I felt it was important to represent that as well, personally.
So it is about you, the film?
No, it's not about me. Like the actual story was taken from a piece of news that happened in the 1990s. So in terms of events, it has nothing to do with me, but the angle I choose and the personality of the characters and everything that I put into the vision of the world, yes, it's very faithful to the way I've experienced the world and what I've watched around me, my teenager friends at the time, and the way they were extremely free about their bodies and their sexuality, and the fact that it never became a catastrophe to be free about your body.
So there is a freedom in that, right?
Yes. Yeah, the movie talks a lot, I think, or explores the idea that a body is a body, and all human beings are extremely basic when you come down to it. And once you've stripped people from the clothes, and once you've been naked a lot of times, you always come down to the same problems, which are, do I love you? Do you love me? Who are we? How can we fit together? And even sex sort of leads to that. And that's, I wanted to basically state a very obvious fact that sex is just sex. And there's always something behind it that talks about the emotional journeys of a person.
So sex is not just sex.
No, in the sense that it's just a mean to something, and it's not the main subject. I guess that's what I'm getting at. It's never just the end of it. And when I say sex is sex, is that there's just always something behind it, the emotional journey of someone, the emotional arc of someone, and that's what I'm trying to explore in the film.
What do you think about this kind of new wave of female directors coming from Europe, or coming from France?
What do you mean new wave?
In a sense, a new wave.
New wave, sorry.
New waves, like, you are telling different stories, and even though the themes are kind of very universal, it's not like, but they are, you see the reality in a certain way, and now you decided, all of you, I think, in a different way, and to represent this world, and you wanted to say that thing, and you just say it.
I was talking about that with my mother not too long ago because I realized suddenly that I was always convinced I had been brought up in a very egalitarian household where my mother and my father were equals, and then I realized that I sort of had rewritten history, because when I was a child, my dad would never do the dishes and would never change the kids, stuff like that. And so I asked my mother, why did I think so much and so easily that I could do anything as a woman because I was worth as much as a man? And she just told me that even though domestically culture had a strong hold on their relationship, they were both teachers, and he considered her his equal intellectually, and that's what I took out of the dynamics, and that's what I built myself with, meaning that for me it was just obvious that I could do anything as a woman. And I think I'm not the only one in my generation who was brought up in that context, thinking that we own the world as much as men, and why would it even be an issue? And I just realized really late in life, when I got out of school around 25, 27, that life was very, society was very misogynistic. And I hadn't come across that because I was doing literary studies, I was very sheltered from it. And I think I just realized it was very important to represent that, so that other women felt the same thing as I did, and felt that it was possible and that it was even normal to just be part of life in the same sense as men were part of society.
And as a filmmaker in France, how difficult is your work, or respect, for example, United States?
In terms of being a woman, you mean?
Being a woman filmmaker.
Well, it's very strange because what's difficult about it is never outwardly difficult. It's never spoken. It's a little bit insidious. And it's sort of retrospectively that I realize sometimes that it was harder for me to get such or such job because I was a woman, because I had a man in front of me who just tended to trust me less, or to give the job to another guy because it was just easier. It's not even aggressive or negative. It's just, you tend to trust people who are like you. So because a lot of men are in the position of making decisions, they end up just sort of going with men.
Yeah.
And I think the knot of progress is going to be in putting women in position of power to make decisions for projects and financing projects. And every time I've sort of pushed through the glass ceiling, it was because there was a woman at the other end who just held her hand and told me, oh my God, I love what you do, come here. I'm pretty convinced that's how I got into the competition at Toronto at the film festival, because the programmer was a woman and she really fought for my movie, which I'm extremely grateful for. My producer is a woman, and I know that when I went through the film commissions in France for the financing, it was mostly the women who sort of defended the movie and said this is worth fighting for. So.
Interesting, very interesting. Here we have a lot of women, they are fighting for other women. We are fighting, Women Occupy Hollywood, we are that in fact. But at the same time, the women in power are women in power because men put them there. So they have to respond. They are not in fact real
I think that's just
really
not
in
enough.
power. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have to really change a lot
Yeah.
to do that. At the same time, so what we believe, what I believe, is waiting for that big change.
Yeah.
We have to really help each other and get
yeah.
together and be capable to exchange our knowledge about whatever in our work. At the same time, produce our own movies. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a global effort in terms of, it has to come from many sides to be effective. And I've always thought that, strangely enough, women are a minority in the professional world, even though they're not in society. And minorities always have to fight for themselves, and they're the first engine of their own progress. And I think as long as women will think that things are okay the way they are, nothing is going to change. Men are not going to just
give
way
away
for us. Exactly.
their
why
power.
would they? They're privileged. Every single human being in a position of privilege has not made much effort to make space for other people historically, and that goes for men. And I don't think, that's what I was saying earlier, I don't think it's proactively negative from men. I think it's just a question of basic comfort. They feel more comfortable dealing with other men and giving jobs to people who look like them.
It's also an unconscious bias, what we call that.
Exactly.
Even women with other women, you just
Exactly.
trust that guy. Today I was talking with this director and he was saying to me, I said, who wrote the screenplay? And he said, two young guys. So it's the first feature film. He is a very famous director. Yeah. I said, really? Why did you give that possibility to these young guys that I presume are two guys, male? And he said, there are two guys. And after he remembered who I was, so he said, I never met really two young girls who were capable to translate that thing. I said, I have a list for you.
Yeah.
And it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah, of course. But that's the thing.
He gave
it's
to
unconscious.
23 years old this possibility to write this kind of, I don't know,
big
probably $30 million movie.
Wow.
And a woman, even it does for her first film, we have examples, first film, she's doing very well. Generally, she doesn't do the second film of the franchise that she established first. And before she get another job, in general, it's 5-7 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is completely anti-economic.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
Yeah.
So it's really about power.
Yeah.
But let's go back to France, because it's very interesting, because I think you girls in the sense, I love this thing, girl power, etc., etc. You girls really are kind of aggressive in that. There is not kind of kindness. So I feel that.
Yeah.
And I really admire this, and this is one of the reasons I looked after you, because there is this kind of I want to tell the story in my own way. This is what it is, and that is my voice.
Yeah.
Voila, that is another point for me important. The voice, personal voice, how this personal voice put you on the spot, on the map of the women directors. You know.
Yeah, I guess I just realized at some point, you know, because it's funny, when I started writing the script, at some point I wanted to change my director name from Eva Husson to just Husson. And my logic was that I was sick of hearing the term woman director because I thought it was so condescending and so annoying. And I realized I did a medium feature film with that name, and I realized the journalists had such a hard time with just one name, and would always go back to Eva, and I was like, oh, this is just not going to work. So instead of trying to fight it, I'm just going to own it, and I'm going to really put it, you know, first and foremost, and I'm just going to turn it into an advantage and a tool. And that was my thought process, but it took me some time to get there because I was just so annoyed at the fact that a lot of films directed by women get discarded in the mind of some part of the audience because they're directed by women and they're like chick flicks, and like that has nothing to do with that, you know, it's just completely mistaken. So let's try and state it quite openly that it's much more than that, and that there is half of society who doesn't get a very legitimate representation of themselves, and I can be a brick of that wall, and I want to be a brick on that wall. And if we're a lot like that, and if we have more and more women doing that, we'll get to a point where it's going to be correct and legitimate, and we will have a side of filmmaking which is going to be a male gaze and talk about a side of the world that I can't really grasp, and we're going to have a whole side that's going to be much more representative of what we live every day.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think, you know, the power, and it's men until now, they created these chick flicks, in the sense they created this kind of romantic comedies, like a very not
it's less threatening.
Yeah, you go out and you feel okay, and it's done in a.
But that's very American as well.
Yeah, that is very American.
Films directed by women in France are not like that. I don't know if you saw My King by Mai
Oh
Wen.
yeah, I'm going to see it Monday.
Oh well, you'll see. It's extremely interesting, and I was very happy when I saw it. I was like, yeah, I know this movie could not in a million years have been made by a man. The way she represents sexuality and what it means for women is so feminine in a good way, because it can be messed up at times, but it's just not just romantic. You know, love doesn't have to be romantic. It can be violent as well. It can be really unsettling and mind-boggling, and it's not just the silly tales that we were fed as young girls and teenagers, where women just sigh next to their chimney waiting for the guy.
That is more an American thing, but I'm Italian,
not
so
just
but yeah,
American,
exactly. We have that kind of ideal somewhere in our brain.
I mean,
you know?
Remember the Pixie Manic Girl, that representation of like a very crazy, just innocent, naive girl that just does not exist in life.
No. So women had to kind of disguise themselves a lot. So, and in fact, sometimes I think that we lost a kind of identity in that disguise.
Completely,
you know.
completely.
So we have to find in Women Occupy Hollywood, what I push women is also to find that voice, who they really are, and just get out with that voice.
Simone de Beauvoir was already talking about that in the 50s, about the representation of women have to give of themselves in order to fit the representation that men have of women. that just drives them nuts because it's sort of a psychic contradictory injunction, you know, like you're supposed to be one way but you're not, because inside you feel something different. So it's so hard to lead your life that way. And I think we're a generation that is sort of finally coming to a breakthrough of, wait, we're not like that. This is what we're like, and we're going to show you. And I find this really, really fascinating. It's very interesting.
Really liberating.
Yes. And you will notice that My Wen's My King was so harshly received by mostly male journalists who were just in shock at the representation of the world, because they just could not understand what she was talking about, because for them that simply didn't exist. And I made the effort of going through the name of the journalist. And
good for you.
Most of the journalists who gave a positive review were female journalists, and you still have men. You know, I'm really not opposing women to men in general, but I'm just saying the tendency is that one. And I'm actually extremely grateful for My Wen to have made that film.
My first film I did with Gerard Brache. He was the writer, and it was about sexuality, a sexual journey of this woman who thought that she had her heart blocked and her body blocked at the same time. So she tried to figure out a connection between the art, so the capacity to love and the capacity to just have sex, and how to put together these two things. It was censored.
Oh, really?
After 5 days, it was censored, and the film was gone.
Wow.
And the journalist, at that time, I think I didn't have anybody, even women, with me, because it was a long time ago. I think you're completely right. Now we are kind of so fed up with this kind of image that just, finito, gone. But that time, I was alone, and that it was really bad. But I think our emancipation goes through the sexuality for some reason. Whatever I see that is will stand is about what we think about sex, in fact. Because probably the world of men is kind of shocked, because they determine those rules in general. You know, you have to be blonde, you have to be cute, you have to be big breasts, whatever. You know, and if you are on all those things, it will be complicated. So, so are you in contact with your kind of the other girls in France, or it's a kind of this? For me, it's a kind of new independent French cinema.
Yeah,
I would say.
I know some of them. I'm very good friends with Justine Triet, for example. But it's just funny in France. Directors are culturally a little bit isolated one from another, and that stands for women. I think there's no tradition of networking and working together. Unfortunately.
So, can you begin that?
I sort of tried a couple of times, but the cultural wall is just very, very solid. So I'm sort of figuring that it's gonna come along naturally, little by little. But I feel that it's just gonna take time. And I'm at the very beginning of the feature film career. So I think it's like this brick thing. I need to put a couple of more bricks to have more clout.
To stop. Yeah. So this is your first film.
Yes.
So.
But what I mean is, I'm really hopeful that it's gonna go that direction.
Yeah, because it's difficult for women also there.
Yes.
So each one of them is in trying to fight their own fight.
But my producer is a woman. I work with a lot of women. I try to be very pragmatic about it to start with. I just work with a lot of women, and I encourage them a lot, so it's a start.
Yeah, that is a good start. And so you study in America?
Yes.
Okay, that is very interesting because
Yeah.
you have this side because you study here at AFI.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, why
Um,
you came here.
Well, it's funny. I studied in the States because they didn't accept me in French film school. And I was like, oh, fuck you. I'll just go somewhere else, you know. I'll find something. And you know, it's just been part of my history now. And I'm very happy I came here because it just gave me a very different way of looking at filmmaking and freed me a lot, I think, from a lot of reflexes that I could have acquired being just in French cinema. You know, it sort of deconstructs things in a very interesting way.
So what do you think is the best of here and the best of there and the best way for you to put the two things together?
I like the very pragmatic approach of American filmmaking to storytelling, where everything can be a tool for the narration, the image, the sound, and it sounds basic when I say it, but for a long time in France, having a beautiful image was perceived as a blasphemy towards the realism of film, and I think this is so ridiculous. You know, from the moment that you decide to have a look on your film, you make an aesthetic decision. You know, whether you want
Even
it
if
to look
it's
ugly or not.
bad,
Exactly.
yeah.
So just own it and you know, just make something out of it. And I like that very basic approach, which was, hey, you know, you can make it look good, and it might mean something. So what can you say with that? And I like the character approach of French cinema and the sort of quest for, you know, metaphysical things. I think that's very interesting.
So you are in a very good position.
I'm very grateful that I can pick and choose from both worlds.
So is a way to say to other directors, just go out, study whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
I just feed yourself, you know, just nourish yourself with different things, because it will make you perceive the world differently, and it will enrich you.
So did you live your life to tell life in films, in the sense, did you go out and had a lot of experiences in order to be able to tell certain kind of stories?
God, I can't say there was any strategy in what I did. I just sort of...
Not for this film, in general.
No, I know. You know, I guess it's part of being a woman. I decided very early on I wanted to be a filmmaker, but when you're a woman, I think allowing yourself to be that and having the guts to say, I can do it, even though your parents told you you could do anything intellectually. I think, for example, and my background was more literary than filmmaking, so I think I could have more easily gone directly for literature than filmmaking. So it took me a while to say, I really think I can do this. Like, it's really, it speaks to me, and I have, you know, I have something that I can explore there. So it took me some time.
In all this, what's a modern love story for you?
Well, you know, modern refers here to the word modernism. You know, after the 1914 First World War, basically the world was chaotic and people had to make sense of it. And the word modernism came about with the cultural movement that was trying to make sense of that chaos. And that's what I was referring to. I think this generation is being given a world that is in pretty much the same shape as 1914, 1918, where everything is just like exploding everywhere. And it's really hard to make sense of that, and everything's collapsing. And that's what they're trying to do.
So this is your modern.
Yeah.
Okay. So you worked Also music. You're doing like you're working with video music.
I did a couple of music videos.
Huh?
That's just nothing.
Nothing. It's not a big deal for you. So,
No.
but you worked with one of the musicians you work with.
Yeah,
for
but I
this.
met her when she was an actress.
Yeah.
So she transitioned into the music world, but that was not initially how we met. So it
Okay,
was-
but
yeah.
she worked with you
Yeah.
in this film.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I've known her for 15 years, and you know she wanted to try it out, and I was not sure it was a good idea because we were friends for a long time, and she hadn't done a feature film, and I just didn't want to mess things up. So I gave her a sample to try some things on. I gave her a few scenes, and she composed some music on them, and I was just really blown away. So
This is another thing, you know.
Yeah.
It's about music composers, women composers,
yeah, which is quite rare.
completely rare.
Yeah,
We hear just they don't work.
exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And she's
it-
amazingly talented, so I hope she gets a lot of work out of this.
yeah, the soundtrack is pretty amazing,
Hmm.
pretty amazing. Let's say, okay, like everything, but the soundtrack is amazing. So you have an important distribution here.
Yeah,
Yeah, they have this history
Goldwyn.
behind about
yeah,
the real
yeah.
movies,
yeah, yeah.
good movies.
Yeah.
Samuel Goldwyn
Yeah.
is distributing your film. So what do you think about that? What?
Well, I'm very happy. Obviously, it was not a given. Nothing is a given in filmmaking, especially a French film. So that just says a lot about the doors that this movie can push. And Peter Goldwyn, who's Samuel Goldwyn now, and I mean, he's at the head of. I think he fell in love with the movie in Toronto, and bought the film there. So it was great.
So what do you have in front of you now?
A lot of work, which is good.
What kind of work now?
Well, my next film is going to be about women in war. So it's very
In war
different.
where?
I can't really talk
Oh,
about it because
okay.
it's sensitive. It's not an easy project,
Mhm.
but it's gonna be in touch with what's happening in the world at the moment. Let's put it that
That's
way.
that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So it's completely another part of the world,
Exactly.
but with the same aggressiveness, because women in war is really something
Yes, it's
important
about
to take.
women standing for themselves. So.
Okay, wonderful. Give some advice to young filmmakers, and even not young filmmakers, to filmmakers. You
I
know?
guess my best piece of advice would be learn to say no. When you don't feel something, when you don't feel it in your gut, you should say no. You should just not say yes because you have an opportunity. It's a very difficult thing to do at the beginning because you're always scared that you're not going to have another opportunity. But believe me, if you really, really have something to say, and if you surround yourself with the right people, it will come to fruition a way or another. So, sometimes it's just not the right timing, it's not the right moment. And if you're not ready, just don't do it.
Another question. After this film, the way it was received and the controversy around, so it put you really in a spot, I think. So, what did you receive as you are writing your own stuff, you're doing your own project,
Yeah.
okay? Because we can see that, seeing the film. But did you receive, for example, for the United States, projects and things to do?
Yeah, I'm reading stuff and but that's the thing, I've learned to say no. It's not because they offer you something, it's right for you, and it's okay. It's like your first loves when you're a teenager. It's not because he's very handsome that he's right for you. So it's like the same thing. So I'm working on that project about women in war, and then we'll see if other things come into place.
So we are very happy to meet you today
Thank
and
you.
talk with you, and
Same
we
here.
will see you tomorrow again, and please stay in touch with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.